Thank you today for joining us on the AGA podcast. We appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to learn all about the history of Thousand Hills. Today we have Matt, and can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what led you to owning Thousand Hills?
Sure. Nice to be here with you. Love AGA, and we'll get into that a little bit. American Grass-Fed Association. I
Yeah.
get that question sometimes. What's AGA? Yeah, it's quite a story, really, leading to owning Thousand Hills. I might take up our whole time just talking about how that story unfolded. But I grew up on a small farm, 120 acres in central Minnesota. It was beautiful, rolling hills, wooded pastures, some fields, and a lot of wildlife. And I just absolutely lived outside as a kid. Didn't matter. It was in Minnesota, winter, summer, I was outside all the time.
Awesome.
So and we were multi-species. We had hogs, chickens, livestock, cattle, big garden, and I was the only boy and three sisters. And really the farm for the sister closest in age to me and myself really kind of became our responsibility because my dad worked in a factory and we really didn't have a lot of money. Had a lot of good food, but not
Mhm.
a lot of money. And we just so enjoyed it. We were involved in 4-H and exhibiting animals and many other projects and really enjoyed that. And then, as I got older, the financial implications started to become real for me. So I went away to college happily and I always had an interest in entrepreneurship and started several businesses. One of them being an organic lawn care company in 1987. Uh, yeah, while I was in college. And that got me started in this whole mindset of soil and soil testing. I was offering that for my potential clients, free soil tests and blending a organic fertilizer that would be appropriate for their yard. And that was fun while it lasted. But then I had a lot of physical labor jobs while I was growing up, and the jobs that I took were like landscaping and things like that. So happily went to college, got a business degree, thought, okay, if I could be a brand manager somewhere, I could then run a business within a business and learn the stuff I didn't really know. Had a
Yeah.
great opportunity to work at Schwann's, left there to start my own marketing agency, worked in conventional food marketing for 20 years, had an opportunity to buy a lot adjacent to the farm that I grew up on. So I bought that lot, built a house, moved my young family there because I wanted them to experience some of the lifestyle. We're living in the city, Minneapolis, and I just really wanted them to experience some of that. Got out there to the lot and started looking around and noticed drastic changes in that landscape. That all the animals of my fellow 4-H farms in the area were gone.
Mhm.
Most of the landowners were older, and the fields that were left were run GMO corn and soy rotation, and the fields were severely degraded. And along with that, all the beautiful butterflies and pollinators and frogs and fireflies and all that seemed to be gone. They were there very, very sparsely, but I just didn't feel the same.
Mm.
So I was fortunate and I was able to sell my marketing agency and think about what I wanted to do next. And in my research about what I could do, I knew I wanted to work in food. What could I do in food that would help improve the food system? And my research came back. I got a piece of research that said the single biggest thing you can do to regenerate the land is to holistically graze cattle.
Mhm.
And that's what I did as a kid. And we didn't have a feedlot. We didn't feed grain. We just grazed cattle on grass in our pastures. And I thought, oh, I could do that. That would be so exciting and familiar and all these things. So Thousand Hills was kind of a startup fledgling operation at that time. Ended up partnering with them because I sold my marketing agency. I could invest in Thousand Hills. And that started the whole journey of learning about grass-fed beef and genetics and how to finish and the regenerative agriculture practices and grazing that went along with it. And that journey I started learning on day one, and I'm still learning today. What is it, 15 years later? And it's really been amazing. Well, geez, it's been 20 years now if I count when I moved back to the land that I grew up on, and um, it's just been amazing. So
That's an
that's
awesome.
how I ended up getting to Thousand Hills.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about how you transitioned from a career and conventional food marketing, and then you went back to the farm. Can you share any like challenges you faced during this transition and how that influenced your approach to farming overall?
That's good. Challenges. Well, there were many challenges. Um, Fortunately, quite frankly, out of the gate, um, I didn't have the usual financial pressure that most farmers have.
Mhm.
So that was kind of an unfair advantage in a way that took away that challenge. But I would say the practices all came naturally to me because in essence there were a lot of them that I grew up with.
Mhm.
So I missed the whole chemical monoculture invasion that we had in our agriculture. Right when that was coming on board, I was leaving the farm. So, in a lot of ways, we operated organically um, and regeneratively. There wasn't that term then, but that's what we were doing. So, and then all that degradation happened with the introduction of petrochemical nitrogen and the glyphosate and GMOs and all that happened during that time span. So that's why it was so shocking when I came back. It's like, wow, this wasn't what it looked like when I left, and yet it hasn't really been that long. And we did a lot of damage in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest practical challenge was the time requirement.
Mhm.
My wife she wasn't raised on a farm. She wasn't quite ready for the hours that are required to start up a farm and manage a farm on your own. That was probably the biggest challenge
Yeah.
in our family. But we got over that, and I was just so pleased to be able to expose my kids now to that process. Not what I thought it was going to be. Hey, come join Nirvana. This is going to be great. But to show them the transition that can happen when you properly steward the earth. And, when I fast forward to now, I can see that that's deeply rooted in their vocations and how they see the world. They see both sides now. They can see the degradation that can happen through our mechanization and our pesticides and all that, and then they can see the benefits kind of blooming in front of them as we implement these regenerative agriculture practices.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome to like raise them that way too. And I bet it's changed who they are as people as well. So that's awesome.
I think it has, and well, I know it has, and I didn't expect any of them to be involved in the grass-fed beef business or the farm. I'm a big believer in going where you're led. I'm a big believer in everyone having their own dream and everyone having their unique gifts to offer. And they don't have to be my dreams and my skills or my gifts. It has to be theirs. And, what's turned out is my youngest son ended up coming back and he's working on the farm and loving it, which I did not foresee at all. In fact, as I went to conferences and learned and went to our fellow ranchers that are selling us beef, and I see these family operations, I was quietly, insanely jealous as I was on the farm by myself and saw my kids out in the world. And I thought, well, I guess that's just not going to be my experience. But Mikhail, my son, came back, his partner, and he and her are managing the farm, And then Melissa, my oldest, she got a master's degree in public health and is extremely interested in nutrition and the link between the land and nutrition, which is huge.
Mhm.
And so she's found that passion and she's contributing that to the business. And then Macy, next daughter, she is a communicator, so she's involved in communications for the company and does a nice job with that. But she also is very community oriented. And so she's going to manage our store that's just opening in Monticello, Minnesota, where we can offer clean food because we're in a food desert. There really isn't.
Yeah.
We're only 45 minutes away from Minneapolis, but the options are very limited
Very
with it.
limited. I've been
it
out that way. Yeah.
Have you?
I had a friend who lived out that way and she moved back to the city because she was like, I can't do this. Her boyfriend's family lived out that way. So yeah, it's definitely out there, depending
It
on
is.
where you're at.
It's amazing how fast it falls off, the ability to buy, good, clean local food.
Hmm.
So that's her mission is Macy's is to start that in the community and offer that so people can access, that food.
Yeah.
Um, and then my other son Max, he's a baker, and he's really caught on fire with um, local food and creating food for people. So he's involved in baking and heritage grains and farm to table pizza, and we're supporting that as well with growing some vegetables on the farm and some
Oh,
heritage wheat so we can turn into grain. So it just fills my heart that they're all finding their unique place, and I have the great opportunity to see them very often. They probably see me more than they'd like, but that's too damn bad.
right. No, that's awesome to hear. This is a very cool story. I know you said from the beginning you were like, I didn't expect it, but here's where you are. So it
Yeah,
seems ever evolving. So that's exciting.
yeah, sure is.
Yeah. To go back to your guys' like mission and vision overall, Thousand Hills has a really clear mission to nourish the soil, the plants, the cattle, and people by holistically grazing cattle for their lifetime. Can you elaborate on how this mission really guides your day-to-day operations?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, when we say we're nourishing soil, plants, cattle, and people, it's very intentional that it starts with soil,
Mhm.
and that without regenerating our soil, we just basically lose our health, we lose our food, we lose so much. So it has to start with the soil. And how I look at it is our grass fed beef that we sell provides a living for us, but it's a byproduct of our practices. And that we're very fortunate that cattle can eat forage and produce such a great nutrient dense product. And it gets even more nutrient dense when they're grazing on a diverse pasture. So we get the soil regenerating, we get the plant diversity that we need in our grasslands for a myriad of reasons, yeah, from pollinators to nutrition. There's just all kinds of reasons to have a diverse grassland. And then, of course, the cattle are healthier because they're eating that great salad bar of diversity every day. And they do well. They're living a great life, expressing their natural behaviors. And then ultimately, without our health, everyone's heard the saying, uh, health is everything. You lose your health and nothing else matters.
Mhm.
And I've been in that situation. I'm a cancer survivor myself. Early in this process, when I really wasn't educated on the nutritional value of food and had to educate myself on that, I had developed cancer. And both of my parents have had cancer. They're still alive, but there's been a lot of cancer in our family. And that really draws me in to all the reasons why we have to do everything possible through regenerative agriculture practices to get the most nutrient dense product we can, regardless of the food category. Of course, we're focused on beef, but that affects all of food.
Right.
And linking that to health is deeply, deeply important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to touch a little bit on regenerative agriculture, can you explain regenerative agriculture and why it's critical for our planet?
Well, like I just explained, it's critical for our health. First is where I look at it. And then when we back up and look at the planet, sure, our planet needs to produce our food, which gets back to the soil. But even, before we jumped on, we were talking weather a little bit, which, standard farmer talk. You talk about the weather today, yesterday, and tomorrow all the time. And in Minnesota this year, we've had record levels of rain over the last 3 months after 3 years of drought. Now we have record levels of rain. And a lot is said about, the extreme weather events. But what people don't talk about so much, the areas that were really flooded in Minnesota were highly tilled areas with soil that's very degraded. And so the soil doesn't have the capability to absorb that water like it did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So it
Mhm.
leads to flooding and a lot of damage. And, the southern third of our state, that's what's going on. And 95% of the fields are still tilled, not even no tilled, but tilled, traditional tilled, releasing carbon, degrading, the organic matters on every field that we convert in our area of the country. It's hovers right around 1% organic matter. So water, you know, essential, just like health, water is essential. Regenerative agriculture practices absolutely equip the soil to hold water like it should.
Mhm.
So we went through rain events on our farm in this, maybe not to the same level of some of the 3 4 inches that fell in a few hours that led to some flooding, but the grand total was big, and we did not have water washing across the hills that we have in grasslands. It absorbed the water. We did not have pooling of water in fields like we saw in the conventional fields. And I was so proud to look and see, you can tell if water, even if you have grass, if the water runs down the hill, it's going to flatten the grass. And we had perfectly standing plants and really was able to absorb a lot of that water. And if everybody had soil rebuilt like ours right now, I don't know what would the level of flooding been. Maybe there's still flooding, but maybe, well, absolutely it wouldn't have been to the level that it was. So water, carbon, we've got green plants poking up through the snow in March.
Mhm.
We have green plants until at least until December in, the northernmost part of the country.
Yeah.
So we have 200 green days easily, probably more than that,
Mhm.
where we're actually photosynthesis is working and grabbing carbon out of the air and putting it into the soil where it belongs. And when you compare that to corn, for example, on June 1st, corn plants are about this tall in our area.
Mhm.
And, it'll get harvested in October, right? So June, July, August, September, we got 120 days
Mhm.
of green, with most of those days or take about 3 weeks off of tiny plants. And so you got about 100 days of green versus 200 when you have a diverse cool grass, warm grass mix
Mhm.
like we have. So we can fix our carbon issues just by having a diverse grasslands. And
Yeah.
we can graze those grasslands and put cattle back on the land. We can take cornfields that are going into our gas tanks, which is absolutely insanity in my estimation. It's been proven that it's a net loss on energy consumption to grow ethanol, but no
Yeah.
one dares say that out loud because it's a powerful lobby,
Oh, yeah.
and you'll get shot down if you are saying anything against ethanol. The corn lobby's powerful.
Yeah.
And so, we could take the third of corn that we produce and go into our gas tanks and graze cattle
Yeah.
and fix soil and help water cycles, help pollinators, create diversity, help the wildlife. We're involved with Audubon and their conservation ranching certification, and it's
Yeah.
awesome because they recognize that proper grazing is great for birds.
Mhm.
just another benefit.
Right. No, that's awesome. I mean, just a little bit on like impact. Your efforts started with 120 acres and have expanded to over 1,000, affecting 13 different small farm landowners. Can you talk about the impact that this has on overall local communities?
Sure. Yeah, that example is my local farm.
Yeah.
So we work with about 30 farmers and ranchers up and down the Midwest from Texas to Minnesota.
Mhm.
And in my little local community, when I started off, we were on a small farm. Well, and I ended up talking to neighbors and just grazing their idle pastures because the animals were gone, and moving the cattle, walking them down the road to these pastures, and ended up working with 13 landowners, like you say, 1,000 acres, educating them all on regenerative agriculture. Just had a great conversation with one of them that was probably one of the more difficult conversions. Um, and he was telling me how great it was and how important it was to see what we're doing with the cattle. He talked about diverse grasslands, he talked about carbon, water, wildlife habitat happens to be his passion, and how we've been able to turn that around by using our cattle. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened in my lifetime. This is
Right.
amazing." Like, this is the guy that grumbled at me every time I'd say, "Hey, do you want to graze any of that land of yours?" And now he was telling me all the benefits, and I thought, "Wow, this is really amazing." So that's my local project.
Yeah.
So to get into the local rural economy, though, that is really important to me because I left a rural economy, went to an urban economy, went back to a very different looking rural economy, and
Mhm.
I want to be able to provide a market to support the lifestyle that I, in essence, created in my little microcosm when I moved back. And these great salt of the earth farmers and ranchers that, for the most part, have discovered holistic grazing, regenerative agriculture on their own to save their land for future generations and give up financial benefit to do it. And
Mhm.
they're really special people. And with a long-term view of stewarding land, right? So we really focus on those family farms and ranches, and then we also focus on processing in smaller communities with our processing, and then that leads to trucking, and that leads to fulfillment, and then we also focus on the independent retailer that we sell to. So, food co-ops, natural food stores, independent regional chains, that's who we sell to because I passionately believe we all really don't want to work for Walmart and Amazon,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
that diversity in our business, in our economic model, diversity is good, competition is good, and we can't eliminate all the competition. And we, as a brand, as a company, and me individually, are fighting for each one of those business owners to be able to thrive and differentiate themselves from the big box and not just be looking at how do we drive out all the costs and how do we eliminate all the competition.
Yeah.
That to me is very critical to what
Yeah.
we're doing.
No, I love that. And to kind of go back to health, because I know you really spoke highly about that. You spoke about our nation's deteriorating health and how it's linked to chemical land and food systems. How does Thousand Hills address these concerns through its practices?
Well, first of all, that brings me to AGA actually.
Mhm.
We didn't have a third party certification for quite a few years, and our first certification was with American Grass Fed Association. And the reason why was because, first of all, our protocol and AGA protocol married up very well. And why is that? Because both of us are committed to not really supporting anything that has to do with conventional agriculture.
Mhm.
Not just for the sake of not supporting conventional agriculture, but because of the practices that are behind it, right?
Right.
So, not using GMO, not using glyphosate, not grazing on those lands if you do have to use a little glyphosate, not confining and feeding cattle an unnatural diet. When I got involved at Thousand Hills in our protocol, we still had allowed feeding soy hulls for fiber. I eliminated that. I absolutely eliminated that because those soy hulls were coming from conventional agriculture, and I didn't want to have any link to supporting anything that had to do with conventional agriculture. So, in general, the loopholes that were created for grass fed beef, meaning doing things like feeding distiller grains from ethanol plants, which is really GMO corn, and then the starch taken out for alcohol and the primarily the hull left fed to cattle in a feedlot and calling it 100% grass fed beef.
Mhm.
That's not acceptable. That's not what consumers visualize when they're buying grass fed beef. They're, oh, great, it was in a feedlot eating GMO corn hulls, and
Mhm.
now we're calling it grass fed beef.
Yeah.
So AGA and Thousand Hills had a very similar view on not allowing greenwashing, not allowing the loopholes that were being exploited by certain brands of grass fed beef.
Mhm.
So that's what brought me to AGA. And that's why I believe it's a great partnership because all of what I just explained, plus it's not an import of grass fed beef. We
Yeah.
can't fix our food system in this country by importing grass fed beef from another country. We
Mhm.
can't fix the food system. We need the cattle on the land to fix our soil in the fastest means possible and the most natural means possible. So that commitment to all USA and that commitment to no loopholes and that commitment to really grazing cattle for their lifetime um, is so important. And I'm so glad AGA exists.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's awesome. No,
Yeah, well, it's all
yeah.
real.
Yeah. So to kind of jump into like future goals for you guys, what are your future goals for Thousand Hills and how do you plan to continue to expand on your impact?
Well, our goals, I believe you're either green and growing or you're brown and dying. So um, we want to continue to grow and we want to continue to positively impact our food system. And we feel like we have discovered a model that best does that in a scalable way. And that is what we call our decentralized supply web, which I described briefly before,
Yeah.
where we work with processors that are in the area of the cattle that we're sourcing, and we then take that product and bring it to further processing, and we ultimately end up in traditional distribution going into retail. I
Hmm.
don't really believe in shipping meat in a box via FedEx because I think it's inefficient.
Yeah.
If it has to be done, it has to be done. But we have a very efficient traditional distribution system in this country that moves product in the most efficient manner we know yet. So we support that. We support traditional retail, especially independents. But we believe, I mean, how we will grow. Um, we've expanded from one cattle harvest plant to four as we source cattle from different regions. And we will add those regions as we have demand first, and then the cattle second, so that we can continue to build out that web. And really, I think that also provides access to this nutrient dense product in the most accessible way for all people, that you don't have to be a multimillionaire to eat good food,
Hmm.
and you don't have to pay $200 to have a box delivered to you.
Right.
Hopefully, you can go to your local grocer, ask for the products you'd like, they get those products, and then we grow this together.
Yeah. I love that. Finally, I mean, can you tell listeners how they can support Thousand Hills and really join this overall regenerative movement that you're?
That was just teed right up. The
Yeah.
first thing you do is go to your local grocer that you
Yeah.
trust. I can tell you, local grocers that have values that align with yours about food, whatever your values are, find the grocer that aligns with you. And then when you find that grocer, trust me, they do a very good job of vetting. we're in natural grocers, they're 150 stores.
Hmm.
It was a 2-year vetting process for us to get into those stores.
Oh, wow.
Many visits, many audits, paperwork, everything, interviews. So find a grocer that you trust and then ask for the products that you'd like to see. It's amazing. Consumers don't really understand the power that they have. But I
Yeah.
swear to you, if 5 people go into a store over a 2-month time period and say, I want product X, chances are you will get that product on the shelf
Yeah, it'll show up.
because so few people ask.
Right. I think people are
So,
afraid to.
yeah. But
Yeah.
when you do, the good news is when you do, it's amplified because so few people do it. So if you could get to your grocer, ask, vote with your dollars, absolutely matters to vote with your dollars. Over 60% of our dollars go directly to our producers. The
Hmm.
big beef companies cannot say that.
Yeah.
The food industry average is about 12, 13% of the dollars go to the producer.
Hmm.
For us, it's over 60%. So you are voting with your dollar. It goes right back to the land. Sure, we got to pay for processing. We got to pay for trucks. We got to pay for all those things too.
Hmm.
But without that beef coming from those farms and ranches, we're out of business.
Right.
So that money needs to go back to them, and it does. And you can absolutely vote with your dollar. I want people to really believe that because it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time you've taken today. I love everything that you've shared. It's been an amazing thing to hear. So I really appreciate it. And I know all the AGA listeners will learn a lot from this too. So thank you.
Yeah,
Just
you're welcome.
yeah. And final thoughts. How can we find you online? Like, how can people reach out to you, maybe directly and ask questions?
Yeah. Well, we have 4 words to our names, to our brand. It's Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed
Yes.
because we needed those 2 words to ensure people that the cattle are always on the land. So if you go to Lifetime Grazed with a D at the end.com,
Hmm.
you can access, to send an email. People find my phone number somehow on there. They call me. So you can engage that way by going to our website. We're also active on social media, Instagram, Facebook. So you can find us if you look for us. But I really appreciate being on the podcast with you. Again, AGA is a great partner doing great work. I'm very proud to be associated with AGA, and we have aligned values, and we know what we want to do, and we need to continue to build the momentum around regenerative agriculture. It's very, very important, and I'm glad that you're a voice for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. And thank you for again for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Have a good one.